Well, thanks everybody who is here, and we're waiting for one of our panelists and trying to see if I can track down a phone number for her, which I can't find at the moment. But I do want to welcome everybody here. We're here today to have a discussion about food justice in Pennsylvania, and basically what we mean by that, why that is important, and what we can do about it. And so today we have Ann Sanders right now with us, and she will introduce herself. And I am trying to track down our other panelists. But maybe it'll just be Ann and I talking about food justice here in Pennsylvania and just the broader sense of what that is and our experiences and the work that they're doing at their organization. So Ann, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, your organization, what you guys are kind of working on, and then we'll just have a little conversation.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Ann Sanders. I work at Just Harvest as the public policy advocate. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Just Harvest, we're based in Pittsburgh. We have a couple of service programs that we offer to sort of help people navigate public benefits and access the anti-hunger and anti-poverty programs that exist. And then we have 2 programs that are aimed at helping people access fresh food in their neighborhoods. And then we also obviously do lots of public policy advocacy. That's my job. So we help folks apply for SNAP benefits, LIHEAP, and cash assistance. We'll also help folks with medical assistance, but that's not our area of expertise. So don't ask me questions about medical assistance. But we can fill out the application for folks, and then we'll help people that are having issues with keeping their benefits on for SNAP particularly. We have a free tax preparation site. So as tax season is wrapping up over the next week, we've been pretty busy in our office. And the reason that we do taxes is because the earned income tax credit and child tax credit are among the largest anti-poverty programs in our country. And a lot of times low income folks are subject to like predatory lending or other practices from paid preparers and some of the other major chains that are out there, or they just have to pay large tax preparation fees. So we do that for free, and we serve around like 3,000 families every year through that program. Mm-hmm. And then our food access initiatives, we have a program called Fresh Corners, which works with local small businesses, corner stores that do not currently sell fresh fruits or vegetables. And we help them basically figure out how they could stock that in their stores and what would be profitable enough that they wouldn't lose money carrying those goods in their stores. And then we also have our Fresh Access program, which enables people to use their SNAP or food stamp benefits at the farmers markets. And we're at 17 or 18 area farmers markets when farmers market season starts, usually in May. And those markets, we partner with the Food Trust to offer food bucks, which is an incentive program. So people can use their SNAP benefits. For every $5 they spend, they get a $2 voucher for more fruits and vegetables. So it makes that produce even more affordable. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a little bit about the work that we do. In addition to that, so a lot of my advocacy role is around, there's a lot of benefits access work that I do around SNAP and WIC. There's that pandemic EBT card that went out since schools were closed. We've been doing a lot of work around how that can be improved and pushing for that program to be made permanent at the federal level. For a summer benefit. So there's I'm a little bit all over the place in my advocacy role, but I'm also on the board of the Food Policy Council, which is a local food policy council for Allegheny County. And we have been working a lot around trying to create a food justice fund which is something that exists. Philadelphia has their version of a food justice fund, and there are some other cities that have those as a way to support local food business and growth, and like local growing and things like that, just to have more food sovereignty in our area.
Awesome. Well, you said a couple of things that I think we'll go back and explain for folks. So what I'm just going to ask, when we say food justice, what does that mean?
So food justice refers to a system of food production, growth, and access that is equitable. So, meaning that everyone has access to the food that they need, that's culturally appropriate, and everyone would have that same level of access, and that it is, decided by the people who are the consumer, or the people who need the food. So it's not like some business or things like that, but it's local decision making about what kinds of food are available.
Right. So a very kind of localized,
Yes,
sustainable system, as opposed to
yes, exactly. Sustainability was the word that I was looking for. That escapes me.
Right. As opposed to the conglomerate,
Yes.
corporate food production thing. So yeah, I as I mentioned earlier to you, that I just spent 5 years in Hawaii. And so this brings on a whole new meaning in terms of accessibility and locally grown food systems, out on a remote island. And they are a big movement around food sovereignty happening there now because of supply issues, right? And you can't, they literally ship everything in. And I had somebody actually ask me while I was there, like, because I didn't think there was any agriculture that went on in Hawaii. And I said, actually, there's a really healthy agricultural and growing. So Hawaii used to be completely sustainable food wise. And then it was basically when they got colonized, all of that went out the window. But they're trying to move back to that because it became even more apparent during COVID that like having to have all of your food shipped in, when the cost is astronomical. There's still some shipping because they're a string of islands, but there is enough actual agricultural land in Hawaii to grow enough food for the people that live there. But they had moved so far away from it. But now there's it's really lovely to see kind of that becoming a more thing. And I worked for a nonprofit that did children's advocacy, but one of our big pushes last year actually was that double bucks, with the double bucks program for food stamp and WIC to go to the farmers market and do whatever, and actually managed to get it passed. So that was kind of exciting. So talk a little bit about why this is important to the Joe Schmo out on the street.
Yeah. So there are a lot of reasons that this is important. From the most cynical perspective, it's just like a basic return on investment. When people have access to food, they especially locally grown food, they're going to eat healthier, they're going to have better health outcomes. I mean, if you want to look at this from a cynical, let's have people be productive members of society, or some other ridiculousness like that, it pays for itself, in terms of medical costs, reduced diabetes, all of those other things. So that's the most cynical reason that it's important. But the other reasons that are important are basic issues of equity and justice. We have especially locally, we have a very tiered and segregated society. There are neighborhoods where you can't find any fresh produce at all. And those tend to be neighborhoods where people are relying more on public transportation. There's less car access. These are low income neighborhoods. It's food apartheid that's what people call it, because it's a system designed to keep people separated from food. And then you have these food oases, which are often more affluent areas. You'll see 7 grocery stores that are large, and they're all right next to each other in one area. And then there's none in other places. And so that whole, and that's what causes these disparate health outcomes and all of these other terrible things that we see.
No, I actually lived when I lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was in a food oasis, and I remember thinking one day, I literally within a 2 mile radius, I had a Whole Foods, a Cub Food, a Target superstore, a Walmart superstore. I had a Kowalski's, which is like the local grocery store, and 2 co-ops. So it was like,
Yeah.
But then I know that if I traveled just 5-10 miles, in a particular direction, or if I was in North Minneapolis, absolute desert. So, right, it was just this really stark difference. And you're right. And clearly you can also, it doesn't take much to notice why that is. And that it very much so that where you can't get access to food is, high poverty, communities of color, primarily. And and most people don't drive or have access to a car, or, it's all, and it just becomes, and certainly no fresh food in terms of, there aren't farmers markets happening there. There are no urban gardens. Like I said, where I live, not only that, but like there was the neighborhood little gardens that people could go. We had like 2 of them even within my little neighborhood. So people, if they want, but you go over to this, 5 miles away and just nothing. And it was just kind of like, that's a problem. That's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of that does like go right back to redlining and other like historic disinvestments from Black communities. These neighborhoods have maybe at one point in time they had small mom and pop stores. Like we think of in our area, Homewood is a neighborhood that is often talked about as a food desert. They used to have like a large grocery store. It was a really big area. And then, white flight happened and redlining and all kinds of disinvestment in that neighborhood. And then, now there's no fresh food to be found in that neighborhood at all. Yeah. So it's very much tied to racism as well. So yeah.
Right. It just is. So talk to me a little bit about, well, I mean, we've hit a little bit like why this is important on the broader scale, but as a community issue, why do you think that this is,
Right. Well, I think that, food is a very important communal good. I mean, we share food, we eat food together. Food is part of who we are as human beings. Every culture, we share things around food. And so when you're depriving people of access to food, of access to that, you're depriving them of not just the physical nutrients that they need, but also of like that cultural importance. And you were mentioning gardens and gardening and growing food together and all of that. That is also like a thing that is missing when you don't have food justice. So it's not just about the like nutrition part of food or any of that. It's a whole communal aspect as well. And it kind of does say something when you're in a neighborhood and people can't get food there. Like it's not just the health part of it or like the tangible part of it. There's the like emotional and cultural part of it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I don't know any culture, quite frankly, where food isn't at the center of how you relate to one another and build relationships and have family and community. And so when you don't have access to that, it really deprives such a greater sense of community. Besides your like immediate community, like I said, one of the things I always enjoy, I come out of doing political organizing work and being in a lot of different communities, was always the like getting excited for whatever the dinner was or the thing, right? And being able to go to people's homes and have a meal, and we sit there and that's how we converse and relate to one another. But when you don't have access to the food that's not, the ingredients that are necessary to cook that meal or do whatever it is you're going to do. Like I was staying with friends here when I first got here to Pittsburgh, and my friend's husband loves to go to fish fries, right? And go around to all the and then like compare like how every little community does it differently. But it really is that sense of like he goes because it's the people, right? It's the people who come and join and have conversation, and that you get the most experience out of. But yeah, it just becomes such a vital to who we are. And like I said, I don't know any culture that doesn't have that at its center, which is why when you don't have it, it is makes it hard. So is there anything that your organization, I mean, like what is and maybe you mentioned this at the top, and I apologize, but because I was trying to track down Rakib, but what do you see as like the most important work happening right now that could be the most effectual thing we could be doing?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about this Food Justice Fund proposal that the Food Policy Council has been working on and putting together. So this is the idea for this is it's an investment pool that would go to community-based grassroots organizations to basically address food apartheid. So the focus for this proposal would be that it would go towards, small grassroots organizations that are doing the work in communities, establishing those community gardens, trying to find retail solutions, working on local food access solutions for their community. And right now, because of the American Rescue Plan, there's some extra funding available. So we would like to see that be used to invest in those communities that have been, disinvested from for so long. So this proposal really is something that we see as a way to address this issue and basically get the resources that are needed to the people that are doing the work already. There is a lot of momentum going on. Rakib, who was supposed to be here, she works for the Black Urban Gardeners, so for bugs, and they are doing a lot of work around growing food, getting more local food growth in Black neighborhoods in our area, and making sure that produce is available to the people in the community.
Right.
And there are lots of people doing, food distributions that, are, especially with COVID and all of the things that happen, there's much more delivery service and things like that people realized needed to be done. And there's always been a gap in like who can actually get to a food pantry during the hours that they're open and the food that's served there and all of that stuff. So addressing those issues as well. And like the American Heart Association has been working with a bunch of groups to do free farmers markets, basically free produce distributions. So there's all kinds of work that's been going on throughout the area, but making those efforts sustainable and putting resources behind them so they can keep going, I think is really important. And that's kind of what we would want to see happen with this Food Justice Fund, is to really help support and bolster those efforts so that they can have a big impact.
What do you see as the biggest hurdles for accomplishing that besides money? That's always
yes.
Funding is always
money is a big one. I would also say land access is a really big issue. I think a lot of times when community development occurs, people think about putting in like nice shiny buildings, but they don't think about community gardens, or they don't think about food access points, things like that. What we've seen happen in our area is that it looks like more and more grocery stores are sort of trying to close down or consolidate into just one location that's larger. And that's problematic. Like that, it needs to go the other way around. If anything, we would like to see food be less consolidated and more available in wider regions. So I think that supporting local businesses that are trying to have food available in these neighborhoods is really important as well. And there's like a vicious cycle here because especially for those of you who are from the area, there used to be lots of like corner stores that had fresh produce and things like that. And then what happened is, we have large grocery stores now, and everything became sort of tailored to having a car and the smaller produce vendors no longer cater to small stores. So this is why a lot of corner stores don't carry produce. You can't order it in anything less than like a giant box car.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder, I think about often, again, COVID time. I was about to say, I was recently in New York City, but I'm like, I realized much like you did earlier, like, oh, that was like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But I was reminded, I grew up in Connecticut and, used to spend a lot of time. But one of the things when I was there, I'd been back in like years, right? And I did have that moment where like I could walk out, I was staying in this little Airbnb and I could walk downstairs and just literally a block away and little great grocery stores like everywhere with fresh produce.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, so it is one thing. I know people, you either love or you hate New York City. That's fine. But this is the one piece that I'm like, that I was like, how do we replicate this? Because this is something they do well. It's the little bodegas that are like everywhere, the smaller grocery stores. There's that small convenience store, and then there's like the small grocery neighborhood store. But they're like, they're all over the place. Like you only have to walk a few blocks until you run into one. And I thought, oh, that I miss. And then it also reminded me when I was in New Orleans, because only in New Orleans, it doesn't really apply, if you're anywhere else in Louisiana. But New Orleans is also the same thing. Like, great, you can go into any convenience store, any little store, and like get one fresh food. They all have a deli counter. There's all like, but they've also done an interesting thing that they actually, in the city of New Orleans, they actually ban fast food restaurants. So they don't allow them. There's a couple that are kind of grandfathered in, but somewhere along the way they went, nope. And so everything is mom and pop stores. They don't do, they don't like chain stores, which I'm like, can we get more of that? I like the idea of that, because I was just like, we don't really need those chain stores. But I missed that. I realized that I hadn't lived in a place in a long time where I could walk to get my food. And when I lived in St. Paul, I could bike. So that was, better. But I was just like, and a little bit in Seattle, but again, I had to be in a very urban core setting in order for that to happen. Yeah. And once you get out of that, there's just everything's about getting in your car, and I kind of really irritates me. Like, I don't want to be in my car so much anymore. Unless I'm going on a road trip, I don't want to have to be in my car to go run a 5-minute errand. But then that's where you realize that, right, this is the challenge. And I always just think about, how do we fix that? What are the solutions to changing that? So I wanted to get your thoughts on.
Yeah. So there is like a larger movement around urban areas to basically like ban the like Family Dollars. I mean, I don't have to like name names, but it really is like that's they are kind of like the Walmart of like the small corner stores. And once they go into an area, the one that was already, they're always going to underprice the one that's already in the area and basically get them out of business. And they don't really carry much in the way of, fresh or healthy foods. There are a lot of places that have set up like specific zoning rules, like these kinds of store. Like if you are a chain, you can't exist within a mile of each other. Mm-hmm. Or you can't, or 2 miles of each other, depending on the locality. So there's policy that exists around preventing that.
Is that policy made at the city, county level? I mean, it could be all three. Some of that is kind of depending on your zoning, right? So your city or county, but it could also be state. You get your state to do it across the state would be great.
Yeah. I think that I haven't seen any of that in Pennsylvania. I think like because of the way that most places home rule charters are written, it would be very hard to get. And this is one of those like unique things about Pennsylvania, right? We have these home rule charters, and then a lot of things are preempted at the state level that basically prohibit localities from doing the things that they want to do. So
lovely.
Yeah. So we, right. So there, a lot of this that's happening, I've seen like in like Baltimore, DC, other large metro areas, but not necessarily in Pennsylvania. And some of this also has to do with, and there's not zoning that's specific to like food retail. So, if a grocery store closed, there's no guarantee that it's going to be replaced with another grocery store. It could be replaced with, some other kind of retail outlet or condos or whatever you want. It doesn't mean that there's going to be food access there. And so that's like zoning regulations as well. The land access issue is related to zoning. And one thing I will say, the city of Pittsburgh is doing is trying to do like a farm to lot program, because we have lots of abandoned lots in the city that aren't being used. And so they're trying to figure out how they can convert those lots into usable land for growing food. And this is sort of like the food sovereignty thing, about having food that's locally grown means that it's going to be locally consumed. You know, if you don't have to bring in all of your food from somewhere else, then you're much more likely to have it year round. So there's that. There's movement more towards like even indoor growing, since our growing season is shorter. So there's all kinds of ways that people are trying to address this issue, and there's not like this is kind of an all hands on deck situation. We have in the Pittsburgh area, we have, you know, a very high concentration of like food desert and food apartheid areas, and there's lots of people throughout the region that don't have access to fresh, healthy food.
Well, you all just elected a new mayor.
Yes.
Not too long ago.
Yes.
Do you have any sense of where he's at on this issue or front?
Yeah, so he has been having his transition team, which he has a really great group of folks on his transition team and advisory groups. They've been doing a bunch of listening sessions, and it seems to be that this is certainly one of the main areas of concern that folks have been raising during those. He has not specifically put forward any policies publicly at this point in time. He had listening sessions throughout February and March, and they're supposed to be coming up with recommendations shortly that will be coming out. So we hope to see investments in food access in there.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. I'm going to ask really quickly. You know, we only have like a couple people here, but if you guys put in the chat, what is your favorite food? And just so we can see, there's only a couple of us here, but well, we are recording this, and so we'll be sharing it afterwards as well. So, and maybe I was never able to get a hold of Rakib, but I might then. We will maybe do another one of these talk stories just as a standalone thing at a later date, just to have, because I just think it's a really vital, important conversation to be having, because the food justice just ties into economic inequality, race, you know, structural stuff that we just need to keep talking about it, because it really is at the heart of food is at the heart of everything we do. And so,
and I would like to add, like, this isn't just an urban issue as well. It's growing in rural areas. You know, with, you know, Walmart kind of came in and knocked out all of these local grocers from all kinds of areas. And now Walmart is identifying, well, which stores are the most profitable? Then we'll close down the less.
Well, you know, I lived in rural Wisconsin for about 8 years. And so it's a double. It's that I lived through a Walmart coming in and wiping out all of the small mom and pop stores for, like, you know, almost a 50-mile radius. So like every little small town within, like, got lost. Some survived, but generally. But it's also the growing from a farmer's standpoint. It's, again, back to like the big growers versus the small farmers, small family farms, and Monsanto, right? It's the big, you know, huge, I mean, it's a whole other, not being able to grow food. Like, they actually prohibit farmers from, if you've signed a contract with them, they're not allowed to actually grow anything else. And so it becomes a whole other messy, hot issue. And so, you know, it was interesting to live out there, because we had I had a grocery store in the town I lived in. And then the Walmart was like 20 some odd miles away. And then they opened up a massive big grocery store right next to the Walmart, which was interesting. And luckily our little grocery store survived, but I did find that, like, what was then available in the local grocery store became like you get less variety, right? And the sense that, like, why are you not getting stuff from local farmers. Although I think where I lived, most of the small family farms were disappearing, like I said, and everything was just growing some sort of soybean or corn or, something that, again, they were getting seeded through Monsanto, which then wouldn't let them. And they were just massive. It was like this really odd thing happening. So you're right. So this is not just an urban core issue. It just very much affects rural communities, and especially if you're in traditionally an agricultural community, it is a whole other problem. So
yeah. And I think that kind of goes back to the importance of like growing food for your area.
Yeah.
Not growing it to be sold somewhere else. You should do both. But
you got to do both. It shouldn't be an either or, but you shouldn't have a corporation then making that decision for you and limiting your ability to do that.
Right.
I want to talk about, I had a interesting it wasn't a project of mine, but when I went to grad school, I was at the University of Minnesota, Duluth, and we went on a field trip, again, because we talked about food access there. Actually, it come up quite a bit. But the University of Minnesota had a little research place that they were looking at the like self-sustaining growing systems, right? And local. So they had built this building where they were trying to figure out growing fruits and vegetables, right? So it was a fully sustainable thing that the fruit and vegetables fed into like a water system, and then which had tilapia fish in it, right? And so it's like, and I can't remember now the exact sequence, but it was basically the system was self-sustaining. And then they would sell the fruit and vegetables to local restaurants. So they actually had contracts with like a number of the local, restaurants and bars for like their tomatoes and lettuces. And like they were, and so they were finding it was working, and it was just a research pilot project at the time, but it was fascinating to go and see it actually in action, like the whole system set up, that you're like, this is doable. And it actually didn't take, because they have the same issue in Minnesota, right? You have a short growing season. And so how do you grow food year round? And so it was really exploring this kind of idea of hydroponic, food growing. And so I was just, of course, fascinated by the whole thing. I'm like, we need more of these. Every town could create one of these, especially in a place where you have inclement weather and you can't grow food year round. Like it didn't, because it wasn't like space wise, wasn't huge. I mean, it wasn't like, you were like, yeah, again, then it comes to funding. Like, who's going to fund that? Right. Always comes back to the money problem.
We actually have, so there's, it's run out of a church. But there's, it's actually in Homewood. It's Oasis Farm and Fishery, and it's the same model.
Right.
And that's the model that other community groups are thinking about looking to adopt as well.
Yeah, I can't remember how the energy production, because it fed into the whole thing, right? It was the plant. I just remember it said, I could visually see it in my brain. It was like the wall with where they were growing, and that fed into the water where the fish were, fed that. But there was, I can't remember how they were feeding, somehow how the system was feeding the fish, but that was then fertilizer for the plants. And then somewhere in that system was creating the, whatever was the fuel for the, keeping stuff heated. It was like a really fun, like, again, that we're talking now, 10 years ago. My brain doesn't remember back that far. I just remember it being like, I remember mind blown. It was one of those things like walking through that and being like, oh my God, this is it. We could do this everywhere. It doesn't seem like it was that complicated, from to the outside eye. Like it all makes sense. Like this should work. So it's kind of cool. Well, talk a little bit about what you think folks can do to help address food justice or food inequality, whatever we want to. Everybody has a different term for it. So what do you think that the average person, again, Joe Schmo on the street, things that they could do to help address this problem?
There's a couple of things that you can do. One, so if this is like across the state. Yeah. So 2 years ago, there was like a Pennsylvania farm bill that went through the state, but they explicitly left off like the urban agriculture investment bills. So,
okay.
Because we live in Pennsylvania, so of course, why not?
You don't grow anything here. It doesn't
Right.
matter.
Well, no, the rural
I mean, you don't in the urban
growing was
forest, like they've got
invested in.
grocery
It's just
stores.
the
They don't need.
urban, yeah, the
Yeah.
urban growers were not invested in. Yeah. So I think that that's something to, keep in mind where your elected officials are on issues like this and talk to them about how important this is for you in your area, especially if you live in an area that's impacted by this issue.
Mhm.
Supporting your local growers and local businesses, like, in your purchasing decisions. And then also, talking to your local, like, municipal leaders about food access and their zoning policies, if possible. There are food policy councils all across the state. So get involved with your local food policy council. A lot of them are doing really great work around this issue. And that's a really good way to tap into folks that are in your area that are working on
Yeah.
this as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for spending a little time with me today and starting this conversation. Like I said, I think we will definitely do more of these, and hopefully we'll get Rakeem back at some point, because I was really excited to learn about the Black urban gardeners and farmers, because I think that's huge. And so folks, if you're not following us on Facebook, the Keystone Progress, please do, because we will be doing a lot of series over the summer and conversations around a lot of different topics, and this will be one of them that we'll come back to. Also should let folks know that this, I think I mentioned at the beginning, we are recording this, and so it'll be in the replay section, and we're just gonna kind of keep talking about it, and what we can do, I think, is the most important piece at the end of the day, like coming up with some good, clear actions for people. Because I think it is there's always the talk to your elected representatives at whatever level of government, but also search out, are there food councils? What other nonprofits are doing this work? What does that look like? How can you get involved? And go and be active, I think, is as best you can, is what I would say to folks. So any last words, Anne, that you'd like to depart, leave with our viewers who are watching now or may watch it later?
I don't know. I feel like we kind of covered a lot. Yeah. And if anyone, I don't know, is my contact information in the link for the session?
Yeah, in the speakers, I put
Great.
everybody.
Yeah. I was gonna say, feel free to reach
email.
out if you're in the area or want to talk more about this. Happy to always.
Man.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to end a little early, which gives everybody back about 20 minutes of their time. For those of you who are here for the summit, if you've not checked out the full schedule back in the reception room, we've still got half a day left. A Lieutenant Governor's Forum. Representative Jamie Raskin will be speaking this afternoon, and doing and like I said, we've got a panel on rural organizing and weaponizing constitutional amendments and voter motor stuff, all sorts of good stuff we've been having conversations on. So I hope we will see you in other spaces, and everybody enjoy your Saturday. And Anne, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be here.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.